Thank you for joining today's Lunch and Learn offered by DataQuest Solutions. We are longtime consultants for Sage 300, and today we're focusing on one of the most popular ISVs out there in the third-party channel for Sage 300, and that is Orchid Systems. They offer a wide range of add-in modules or full modules to Sage 300. And today what we're going to focus on are three of those modules. Those modules include Information Manager. That is a tool that adds on to Sage 300 and offers the capability of context-sensitive pop-up notes. So whatever screen you're on in Sage 300, no matter if that's a third-party module or a core module of Sage, if you need to add informational notes, maybe those are procedures, maybe those are specific instructions about how to process an order for a given customer so that when that customer is up on the screen, notes specific to that customer are what pop, or a variety of other content. So you're going to see how there is a context-sensitive panel that comes up on the right of whatever your data entry screen is with Sage 300, and it has different types of content in it, which we'll go through in the demonstration. One of those other types of content is the ability to drag and drop files into a transaction-centric or record-centric document management link window. So you can add files to Sage and associate them with a particular maybe AP invoice number, or maybe a specific customer's ship-to location because we have extensive maybe shipping instructions, or perhaps MSDS sheets for a particular item. Lots of different possibilities for how you can associate different kinds of files. And image files about items is another one of those possibilities that you're going to see a little later. And then another type of window or panel inside that side window that Information Manager offers is integration with something called Extender. So this is where you can add logic to react to what's happening on the Sage screens. So an example that we're going to see is when I change the credit the credit limit of a customer, it will log that that credit limit has been changed, by whom, at what time, and automatically send an email out that that event has taken place. So a very powerful bolt-on module that has a variety of different types of capabilities that happen inside the panel. So we're going to move on to actually go through the demonstration at this point. All right, so here we are on the Sage 300 desktop. The first thing to understand is that Information Manager Notes places a system tray icon that has the sentinel that looks for that which is happening inside of Sage. It can connect to SharePoint, but most importantly what it does is it figures out what screen you're on inside of Sage and puts that value in this roto ID, and then it also knows what field name you're on inside of that screen, and that combination of elements then trigger whatever notes you've configured to show up based on the context that you're in. So just a quick peek at our setup screen. We won't go into this in much detail, but this is how the configuration can happen, where if I have a specific screen identified, what one or two, combination of two fields trigger something to happen. And that something can be a note. It can be how files are stored in what directory location, or it can be what extender or set of script triggers something to happen when I'm on that Sage screen. So this is where all that setup happens, and now we're going to actually see some examples of these things taking place inside of the system. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to look at the customer screen. And so if you're already a Sage 300 user, this is probably not a familiar screen to you over here on the right. That is the Information Manager panel. And we'll get to this particular note that you're seeing now a little later in the demonstration. What we're actually going to start out with is an edit of the credit limit. So here's an example from a little earlier today where I actually modified the credit limit from 14,000 to 15,000 as user admin on this date at this time. So what happens here is the extender solution is looking for a particular combination of events to take place, and then it triggers this particular record or note to be automatically inserted based on the data entry that I'm doing on the screen. So let's show that as an example of how this takes place. So keep in mind right now we have a note that says it has changed from 14,000 to 15,000. So now we're going to change it to, let's just say, 17,000. And I'm just going to hit the Save button. So what will happen is the system actually confirms what it's done here in this particular case because it also has sent an email. So this is just a confirmation that that has taken place. And if I were to close this panel, in order to refresh the content of this panel, this icon that you see in the top right that looks like a little page of notes is how I get that panel to come back up. And now that panel has the new note against it that is the change from 15,000 to 17,000. So in this particular case, we're only revealing the most recent changed value of this credit limit. But there actually is a log that stores all of the changes wherever this type of scripting takes place. So if I were to look at my log, I can see all the events that I have changed these values and who did that change on what date. So this is very valuable from an audit standpoint and helps compliance with things like Sarbanes-Oxley or other audit controls that need to be where compliance is necessary of some sort. So now we're just going to look at a couple of other types of notes. We'll come back to this blue screen, but just keep in mind at the moment that I'm seeing different colors in my panels here on the right, and that does have some significance. So we're going to close this out, and it also closes my associated note panel, and move over to the inventory control module and look at a particular item that also has notes associated with it. So if we call up the fluorescent desk lamp, now here's an example of some other types of notes that we have. So you can include URLs in your notes, and those notes will end up showing up as a link on which you can actually click. You can also store graphic files. And then different types of notes can have either multiple notes that are of that type. So we're seeing 3 different blue notes for item notes here. But there is a different type of note, which is a category distinct from these that are blue, that is red. So if I'm looking at the setup of that note, there might be a reason that I consider that to be urgent. So if you notice here, I've got different categories: item, 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 and then urgent. Because that note category is urgent, that is why it is a red color in the context of looking at items. So I had mentioned earlier that there's another type of note, that blue note that we saw against the customer. Well, let's also look at that note in the context of General Ledger Account Master. So I've not brought up any particular account master at this point. This note is just popping because it is of type roto ID. So basically it shows up as an instruction set of notes anytime I visit this particular screen. So as we noticed in the beginning, when I'm on this screen, it is screen roto ID GL1100. And so this note has been configured as type instruction, and its purpose then is that anytime I visit this screen, I need to inform the users about particular procedures we have in the way that Sage is implemented in my company and might be unique. So I need to move my employees through a very specific process, for example. So now let's take a look at how documents can be associated with different screens of Sage and be specific to a context. So in this case, we're going to look at an existing batch that we've got already set up to have some notes and show you how those notes work. So I might have let's see, a few different entries here showing that in this particular case where my document number is ending in 899, this top panel are those fields, or sorry, those files that are associated with when my vendor is equal to 1200, if you notice here at the top, and my document number is equal to IN08899. So I'm seeing only the files that are associated with that combination of values. In the second panel, I'm seeing all of the files for this vendor, in case that's useful to me, while I'm doing data entry specifically for this invoice. Maybe I need to look up some other invoice. And it just uses regular Windows file association to pop or execute whatever file type I have here. So you can see there are also emails associated with this. So just double-clicking on the file executes its corresponding application. So I'm going to scroll to the next entry and keep your eye on the content of these panels over here on the right as I scroll. So I've got a different invoice number ending in 588 now. So I have a different vendor as well. So now that I have done that, my content has changed in both boxes to be sensitive to the context that I'm in. So for example, in this case, I have no copy of the purchase order in my entry for the data entry of invoice 9876 for vendor 1400. So on my desktop, I just happen to have a purchase order file here that we'll use as an example. But what's important to note here is notice that my file name is my purchase order, and as soon as I drag that into my invoice file or invoice panel, it actually renames the file according to the rules that I've configured Information Manager to follow for how files get dropped in. So if I were to add other files here, it's just going to enumerate them with a unique suffix. Next, we're going to take a look at a more sophisticated combination of Information Manager panels that contain both extender scripts that allow you to do some drill down, document management link, and just regular notes. So let's take a look at order entry. Order entry is one of those areas where it really helps customer service to have a lot of information right at the ready for them whenever they're working with a customer. So if we look at just an existing order, now we can see that there are numerous panels over here on the right. And in those panels, we're doing things like showing the total sales for this customer for this year or from all time, however we want to configure this script. But that is doing a read of the sales statistics and launching a SQL statement that actually does a real-time look at the database to get that value and show it while we're doing data entry. Another panel here shows what we saw before while looking at the customer. and that is when the credit limit was last changed. So although we're on the order entry screen this time, the same note is visible because we've associated it with the customer number field and are pulling that note in order entry just like we did in AR. So the same note can be visible in multiple screens. And then you're seeing your document management link panel here, looking at copies of invoices against this sales order, for example. And then now you can also see how the extender panel that shows something that is both customer and item specific. So in this case, for customer 1200, so if you see that just to the left of the slash, it is actually showing customer 1200 and then the specific item A1103/0, and we're able to see quantity sold, net sales, and average price. But as I move in my grid, you can see that it actually is updating the values in that panel sensitive to the item that I'm looking at. So not only can I work with fields that are in header areas of the user interface, I can also work with fields that are in the grid area. And in this case, let's take a look at drilling into the Zoom screen for this item. And you can see here that because this particular screen has a different ID than its parent screen from which we drilled, then I can have a different set of notes that show based on being in focus on this screen. So for example, being able to see my graphic image of that item might be something that I only look at or take up screen real estate if I need to by zooming into the item zoom screen. So, and then you can see here where down below there are item specific document links related to labels required or quality assurance checks that must be done for this type of item, and so on. And then finally, the last is just an example of being sensitive to the order number and showing a value there, which is probably the PO coming from the customer, for example. All right, and then in our final example, we're just going to look at the shipment entry screen and see just one more type of interaction that we can have with the system using Information Manager notes. So I'm going to look at my list of shipments, and I'm going to pull a particular shipment for customer 1200 here, and then I see I have a whole list of additional types of lookups that I can do with the system. So looking at the second panel, for instance, I'm able to see the aging of this particular customer right here on my shipment entry screen. I'm able to see the breakdown of my credit position with this customer. I'm able to see associated invoices for this customer. And then what's different than what we've seen so far as well, these actually can be interactive content inside of these panels. So in this case, we can actually drill into a particular order and it pull up the order screen by drilling into that from the extender script panel content. So as you can see, this is incredibly powerful and offers pretty much unlimited possibilities for all the different ways that you might need to present data for your particular use of Sage 300. So that concludes our presentation for today for Information Manager Notes. If you need any additional information, please feel welcome to give us a call at 574-772-6100 or go to our website at dquest.com. And if you visit us on the Contact tab, there is an opportunity there for you to send us a message electronically. Thank you. And again, today we covered Orchid Systems, Information Manager Notes, Document Management Link, and Extender.